The views and opinions of the guest does not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the host, the show, and the team. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the second episode of the podcast where we figure things out and learn from the expert. Again, Paulo Gonzales and IDK What To Say. Now, it's a really interesting episode on what we have right now. It's a good precursor to what we have during the first one when we have Dr. Howard Farran. We had this conversation about him wanting or preferring a group practice more than anything else because you would have multiple eyes when looking at a case. But this is a game changer because this next person that I am going to introduce, he created a dental AI software where it pretty much mimics the same thing, and it's going to be in the comfort of a tablet or your phone probably. And we're going to learn more from him. So he graduated in the University of Maryland, Baltimore County for a bachelor's degree in computer science. And that's also where he co-founded, and he is the CEO of Dentuit Imaging. Let's give it up for Dan Lee. Hey
Hey,
Dan,
Paulo.
how you
Hey, nice to
doing,
be
man?
good, man. Good. Thank you for having me. Appreciate the time that you give me here.
No, man, we're really happy to have you here, especially with this technology that you are creating. It's so exciting. How does it feel that right now, you are in the cusp of creating something that would be helping dentists all over the world?
It's a lot of different feelings, I would say. So it's exciting, it's stressful, it's tiring, but it really is this seemingly fine balance that we're kind of playing between kind of using technology kind of research that we kind of understand from ML and AI research and us coming from a more computer science background. We're trying to leverage what we understand computer science to be able to do, in this case, artificial intelligence and deep learning and all that, and be able to apply to some other industry like healthcare. In this case, this is dental care. And so this idea of trying to now apply technology to actually solve a problem in some other space can be incredibly challenging for a couple of reasons. And so one would be, I would say, I'm not a dentist, or I don't happen to be, a dentist in this scenario. But fortunately, I have a lot of family members that are. But I wonder if I was perhaps a dentist myself, would certain things go quicker, or is it better that I wasn't a dentist to kind of mitigate as much perhaps personal bias as a provider? And then the second other challenging thing is, of course, kind of this idea of forging a new path, right? You said, the idea of this doesn't really exist, and that is fact of the matter, like matter of fact, like there's nothing like this exists, and nobody has really kind of defined the pathway to kind of inform perhaps companies that are coming up later on to kind of say this is perhaps one way to kind of get to market and successfully kind of bring your technology to solve a problem in the dental care space. And so we're trying to pretty much gamble on our decisions and hopefully make the best decisions moving forward.
Yeah, man. That's the interesting about this company of yours because you do not, although you have family members who are dentists, you don't have a dental background, and that is exciting in the sense that being a dentist and knowing people who are dentists in other school, we usually just become very very loyal to the school of thought that we have in terms of learning certain stuff. But you, since you have no background, it gives a good angle because you have an open mind to get all information as possible and with less bias with it. And I know there's a lot of things we talk about with Dentuit, but I'd like to start from the beginning. You said your family members are dentists. What made you decide to go into computer science?
Okay, yeah, so that's a great question. Actually, when you talked about me getting that bachelor's degree at University of Maryland, Baltimore County, or UMBC, which I think maybe some others would remember more as the upsetter in the NCAA tournament, the very first to kind of up to the first round. FYI, UVA hashtag. But anyways, pretty much, that was actually my second degree. And so I think it's important kind of to also kind of emphasize that, it wasn't the most direct route that I, arrived here to kind of be able to kind of, really study and enjoy and embrace computer science as my profession, more or less, if you will. But before that, I actually I had gone to undergrad at Penn State University in Pennsylvania, and basically got a life science degree there in 2009. And you can only imagine around that time it was a economic recession at the time, although it seems a lot smaller compared to what we're going through now. But there's a lot of similarities and parallels that is really similar to what we're going through right now. And so, but I'm in a different situation now compared to where I was in 2009. So it's very fascinating to compare the two and see how I'm now getting through this, economic kind of challenges with the position that I'm in, seemingly even in a more riskier position, trying to create a startup in all times. But I will emphasize that the things that I've kind of always been kind of told, and what I kind of noticed from recent history, is that some of the most successful companies, Airbnb, Facebook, you name it, Instagram, they all actually came out during the economic recession. It was around that time where I believe a lot of people just started to lose trust, including myself, in more of the system at the time, and sort of, the education system will, a college degree will buy you a job directly, etc. That was kind of shattered, and kind of a reality check around 2008, 2009, when I graduated with the life science. It was either I go to graduate school and invest even more student debt, or I kind of, be without a job or do some, low wage job or what have you. And so that was a reality check where I kind of spent then some time trying to figure out what I really wanted to do, and allowed also the world, the society, to develop technology-wise as well. Because around 2009, AI and ML is certainly not where it is today. Be it both the capabilities, but also the accessibility. I'm a big proponent of having and providing access to not only healthcare, if you will, but also technology, the ability to kind of use and learn how to use technology to then be the next generation of problem solvers is a huge motivation for me, because that is sort of how I fell into then my next phase after life science, I suppose, is after a few years of kind of trying this and trying that and working some freelance. I ended up I ended up actually searching in Google randomly boot camp, coding boot, because I read something about it. I read something about how you can actually develop a career out of some boot camp. And so I was like, no way, this is possible. And I Googled like boot camp, Baltimore, Maryland, which is where I am, and which is where I was born and raised around there. And one of the boot camps that was local to Baltimore came up. That was Baltimore. And that is kind of, to this day, one of our startups, long-standing partner. That is our kind of our facility where we do the R&D and where our offices are. And it all started from me kind of searching, what is a boot camp, and is there something like that in this area? And there was. And next thing you know, around 2016, I'm taking the boot camp classes. I'm getting like exposed to coding and the things that you can do with that. And then one thing led to another, and I was like doing this internship with a very early stage startup. And from there, I kind of like learned the agile methodology principles and how to run maybe a startup with many different responsibilities. And then at some point, I wanted to go back to school and really kind of fully understand computer science from an undergraduate kind of degree education pathway. And I, with a little bit of money investment, I basically went back to school, in this case UMBC, got the computer science degree, and basically went into UMBC with the intent of being an entrepreneur at that point. I wasn't going to just settle for another system kind of based job where I have to kind of rely on some institution to kind of ensure my job security or whatever. I wanted to now do the things that I wanted to do, and do it the way that I thought was right, and what I was taught over experience and internships, and do it after I graduate. And so right before I graduated with the computer science degree, at that point, my brothers, have graduated from dental school. They're going into the dental field, and I had this conversation with my middle brother, who's again a practicing dentist here in the U.S. And I believe it was in Toronto. We were on a quick summer vacay up in Toronto. Beautiful there, by the way, during the summer, not in the winter, but during the summer. And
I heard.
and
I heard.
yeah, but yeah, all the Uber drivers were like, yeah, it's nice now, but yeah, wait till you see the winter. I'm like, yeah, I won't be here in the winter. But the thing is, so yeah, I do remember this specific conversation with my brother, and I was like, I was like, I knew a bit more about computer science technology and where it was in respect to society, like what was accessible, what was available, and what was possible. And I was really getting into it, and I basically did like a customer discovery interview that I didn't even know was a customer discovery interview. Straight up asked my brother, without any interjection of AI or some other technology that could possibly solve something. I said, if there was some pain point that you wanted to just solve in your current workflow today, where you see your patients today, and it can be something that technology in general can potentially address, what would that be? What would be your number one top of mind immediate thought that comes to mind? And he, without question, no joke, just said, to be honest, as I'm like looking at the X-rays of my patients, I just wish there was a more reliable and quicker way for me to kind of ensure that I've kind of seen everything that I need to see in terms of interest areas, so that then I can be a lot more comprehensive when I'm looking at the patient manually, or when my brother David kind of then shuffles over to the patient and then starts kind of reconciling and confirming what he sees. He says, he spends a little bit too much time, he feels like, dealing with the various image processing filters that exist in today's imaging software solutions that probably Dr. Farhan knows about or talked about, perhaps. Just basic, brightness, contrast, you name it, right? The Instagram filter like stuff that you have to manually apply and also play around with to get it to the right kind of settings, so that then you can have the best possible kind of interpretation. Two things kind of stood out to me immediately when he told me that. One was, I think that can be a solved problem, if not already solved in some other domain with computer vision. And I was taking a computer vision course at the time. And then the second thing was, man, that's even worse than like the concerns that patients already have with this idea of, well, I wish there was just a second opinion or just one other expert, qualified on the dentist level to be able to at least give me some secondary confirmation, right? Some affirmation. And so you combine those two, and the need for some sort of consensus-based AI support becomes a lot more clear. And that was the case as I finished up the computer vision course, did a little kind of project where we just did a small kind of scale caries detector using data augmentation, one of the machine learning techniques that I wanted to play around with. And me and my classmate, we got some really just surprisingly impressive results, to the point that led into a pitch competition towards the end of my graduation, won the pitch competition, took that money, and started Dentuit imaging in the following summer. And then as I started, I knew that I had to at least work for a little bit while I could, figure out a way to go full time. And I can tell you how that happened for me to be full time with Dentuit now. But for a year after I graduated, exactly a year, I just worked as a data engineer for a local data analytics company in the area. They contract with the CMS, which in the U.S. is Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Insurance, and so I did some data engineering work there. But I knew going in that was just going to be a placeholder for what I was going to eventually do, was to find a way to go full time with Dentuit, which is the situation now.
Yeah, actually, listening to your story on how it started and learning from your brothers, I see you're going against the grain. And one question in my mind is, what were your parents thinking when you decided to go this route? That, because I mean,
Right.
I'm Filipino,
Yeah.
so mostly in all Asian cultures, the parents would love for you to go the safer route in terms of financial stability. Like they would probably ask you to become someone working in the health field,
Yeah.
or probably in law, or business. But you went against the grain in a time where developing apps isn't really as lucrative as it is now. What did they tell you when you told them that you're gonna take this kind of route?
They didn't take it seriously. They thought that it was more of a another one of Dan's side project that is going to be a side project in their minds. And I won't lie. I think it's still that sort of dynamic right now. That is how they feel more or less. But at some point, I kind of, and so this is where I think the turning point in my life and how I kind of changed my perspective in a more maybe optimistic and productive way was around when I said, so I started Googling for things. When I started Googling for basically, boot camp opportunities and stuff. Because, me asking my parents about that is a trivial effort, right? So the
It's
idea was at
I
some
could
point I
imagine.
realized that, like, maybe my parents have the good intent. Obviously, they don't have any kind of negative intent behind what they're trying to provide as advice or suggestions of what to do in my life. At some point, I just realized that there's limitations and therefore flaws with that as well. And so at some point, I developed really a passion to in being kind of self-driven, sort of kind of like taking my own initiative to figure out some answers to the many questions obviously I had with my life at that time. You can only imagine before Betamore in the boot camp, many questions, right? Like why didn't what my parents told me is going to work out is not working out? Is it because of the recession? And why is everything that used to work before the recession completely not working seemingly as a process to the American dream in this kind of recession that we're going through? And so a lot of questions were going through my head, and at some point I just kind of realized, what, some people have limitations to what they know, and that is their own little world. And I think everyone has a point where they kind of feel like maybe the other way is perhaps the better way, given where society is going, and we're a different generation from our parents. And so at some point you just block out the noise. All with all respect, I don't believe in being disrespectful or anything in that sort of being this kind of rebellious character, if you will, but more just kind of respecting their opinions and their understanding of society in the world, and then also accepting this kind of responsibility that you are you are responsible for yourself at the end of the day. It's that typical idea of kind of maturing perhaps, and taking more responsibilities for yourself and the decisions that you make. And unfortunately, I will say, as an Asian person kind of growing up, you don't really get that
True.
encouragement to kind of think for yourself. It's more like, I don't, as a parent, it seems like I don't trust what you're going to think for yourself. So let me tell you what I think is the right way, and give that a shot. Something along those lines. You're never really encouraged as much to think for yourself. I mean, every situation is different, but I think on average, that trust level between parents and children, if you will, I think is less so, just because of the way Asian culture perhaps is. You kind of learn to respect and listen to your elders, etc. I know, but at some point I just realized listening and being respectful is one thing, and is a different thing compared to not, it's different than you always just listening and doing what they tell you to do. There's a certain point where they're human beings and they don't know everything that they're telling you. So it's a matter of just figuring out the answers for yourself, and that's what I ended up doing, and that's what I'm continuing to do. If it wasn't for the internet, to be very clear, I don't know where I would be, to be very honest. Like, I learned a lot of what I know now from just this motivation to self-learn the things that are available online.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
totally agree with everything you said, man. I mean, all our parents always wants what's best for us, and probably
right,
the reason why they would want you to be in the health route, or it's because during the time they were building their life, that's probably the most lucrative jobs. And if they hear something like being an artist, or being a coder would make millions of dollars, they wouldn't believe it because they never saw it in their time. But the
right,
world evolves, technology evolves, and at the end of the day, you have to go with your gut. Because if you don't, then you don't want to blame them for not doing what you really want to do. But yeah, I get the respect. I mean, I always need to, we always need to find like that balance, that we are honoring them, and at the same time doing something we love. Because if we go all in on their side or all in on our side without respecting or thinking of they would what their thoughts are regarding what we're doing, it's gonna spell trouble, especially
Yeah,
with
well,
our
if it
culture.
doesn't work out, it's so easy to start blaming them, right? You get this kind of temptation,
Exactly.
like, well, you told me to do this or that, you told me to do A, and look how it turned out. See, and it's like, well, was it really that way, or was it really, And so there's a lot of, blaming that goes on when you don't take responsibility for yourself and the decisions that you make very early on. And so that, it doesn't mean that you just make reckless decisions on your own and say, well, that was my decision. I don't care. I stick by it. But making informed decisions, like, I think we're all reasonable here and fairly intelligent in the sense that, we try to make the most informed decision possible. And that, again, goes back to kind of doing your own research, doing the due diligence to kind of know at least enough to kind of then be dangerous with it, if you will, to kind of be able to make some effective decisions. Because people always say this, right? Life is decisions that you make one after another, and they are a sequence of a cause and effect, right? So more or less, but there's always learning opportunities in those areas, only when you, again, I think, take responsibility. If you don't, what motivation and initiative do you have to say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to learn from that because that didn't work out? Rather, you're busy kind of blaming other people and blaming other kind of reasons that may have been a partial factor, but is not the main kind of driving force behind that perhaps not working out. And you can look at it in various other ways, right? Like, not working out for you at that time may seem like this devastating, game over situation. Whereas if you kind of maybe step back a little bit, look at the higher kind of, the 20-foot level view of the situation, was it a setback or was it just one step towards the end goal that you were pursuing? And so it's those things that kind of you learn, I guess, sort of along the way. So,
Yeah, and I mean, looking at what's going on with your life right now, it seems that the payoff is really good. But yeah, let's talk about Dentuit. I mean, if for our listeners who aren't familiar with the dental AI, could you explain to them
sure.
what Dentuit is to the dental world?
Sure, of course. So Dentuit is basically dental artificial intelligence technology, basically. More specifically, it's a clinical decision support system, if you want to look at it that way, for providers and even payers. Payers meaning the dental insurance carriers here, at least in the U.S., because of the way that the insurance works here, compared to maybe other non-U.S. countries, there's a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse that also occurs when you're submitting claims in a certain way. And so there's opportunities there too, and I can talk about that as well. But the main kind of driving force behind Dentuit, and the reason why, and the use case that we had in mind when we started Dentuit, was to be able to seamlessly support the dentist while, like my brother, is reading an X-ray, to be able to get some extra opinions and support information that is also rendered on that image, so that the patient is not only getting the kind of the advice and a diagnosis based on just one person's interpretation of an image that they see or an X-ray that they see, but rather the dentist's interpretation combined with countless numbers of dental experts that has been involved in developing our model. And so that is what we mean when we say consensus-based clinical decision support. That consensus is an extraction, a derivative of basically how we train our model to then provide the inferences that ultimately render as these kind of colored indicators on these x-rays that the dentist is looking at. And so how we train it is we have input, right, including yourself, Paulo, from various multiple dentists, not only from a specific region, from all over the world, and also be able to kind of feed new data, images, and x-rays to the model that are diverse and are kind of generated by multiple sensors. And so that kind of plays into the other aspect of our goal and our mission, is that we want to not only seamlessly support the provider in that workflow and provide as much, non-biased information as possible for the patient as well at that point of care, but to be able to do it across any region and any location, such that you can use any sensor, any imaging software, and be confident in knowing that you can download Dentify, which is the name of our product or service, and download Dentuit and effectively still get the benefits and get started right away in the easiest way possible. So we kind of look at that as our kind of primary objective is, is it, are we making their process more difficult, or are we making it a lot more easier? And if we're making it a lot more easier while kind of improving the quality of the diagnosis, that being kind of allowing the dentist to kind of detect early lesions like cavities early on before waiting too long, and then you have to do the drill and fill, but maybe present more opportunities to kind of go down a more minimally invasive route. That's the beginning, I think, of a transformation that you'll see in dentistry. So I do think Dentuit is a small part. Dental AI is a small part. It will be hype and nothing but hype to say that dental AI is the future and that is the solution to all your dental problems, because that is simply not true. But it is a part. It is a player. Maybe not a small part, but it's certainly a player, not the main thing, but just a role towards transforming dentistry into a lot more evidence-based care, that you're not so worried about the bias of that one dentist kind of influencing the treatment plan. I know there's a lot of concerns amongst patients, right? Where, why is he telling me that I have so many cavities? I don't feel much, but it seems like he's just trying to now make a quick buck off of me. Those type of questions need to be nullified, because we're talking about healthcare. This is not some cosmetic treatment that you're going, and saying that, off a menu you want this and this done. But the thing is, that is somewhat the case in dentistry today, at least in the U.S. anyways. It's sort of like, I want to get this tooth kind of treated and fixed, but maybe I'll pay for that tooth later. Something along those lines. That kind of very kind of consumer-based approach. There's good benefits that come from that type of model for sure. At the same time, we're talking about healthcare. It shouldn't be this idea of kind of fundamental compromises to your health due to a menu-based pricing scheme or something along those lines. And so if we can standardize and normalize the dental care in a little bit more kind of consistent manner, no matter where you are as a provider, no matter where you are as a patient, and no matter what your economic and background is, that you will get fairly good dental care no matter who you see. No more of this kind of, man, is there another dentist that you can refer me to that really, many people will trust? Kind of going off that connection route, but just knowing that, they use Dentuit or some dental AI technology, at least confirming that understanding will then give you this sense of, more confidence in the care that you're getting. Because my brother jokes around all the time, Paul. I don't know about if that happens to you, but my brother always jokes around saying that every time he leaves a room, the operatory room, he always kind of overhears his patients kind of like whispering to the assistants or the hygienist and asking them, by the way, you think Dr. Lee's suggestions are right? Like, is it too much? Is it too little? Like, what do you think? And they always try to get some kind of affirmative kind of confirmation from the people there. But the thing is, like, my brother jokes around saying that they've already had a story kind of planned out and everything, and so the assistant already knows this coming, and so the assistant is just like, oh yeah, absolutely, Dr. Lee knows what he's doing, and everything that he says, definitely go with his suggestions. And so they work together in that sense. But if there's a way where we can kind of minimize the bias there and really kind of present a more standardized approach to at least identifying issues in an X-ray, ultimately we don't diagnose. That is that is another thing that a lot of people kind of mistaken Dentuit for, is also you automate the diagnosis of certain lesions or whatever, and we don't. What we do is we optimize the opportunities for the dentist to make the best possible diagnosis every single time. Not when you're up in the morning early and you're seeing your very first patient, you're fresh, you just had your coffee and you're on a roll and your diagnosis is on point. And then maybe towards 4 p.m. you're kind of fading out and your diagnosis is maybe not quite up to par or whatever. But being able to make that more consistent with technology like AI is very much possible, and I think is very much needed for sure.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
Actually, that's the cool thing about it. Like, of course, there's going to be patients or insurance who would be doubtful if you marked something as a tooth filling or a cavity, and having something as a dental AI where they're gonna see it in the app, and they are sure that it wasn't made by someone I know personally. Because usually they would think I'm in connivance with someone else if they ask for a second referral. At least
right.
they would have that thinking that, hey, there is really something in this tooth, and it's what's going to happen. And for us dentists, the cool thing about it is that, it minimizes eye fatigue. I've always said this, that if you have multiple patients coming, especially during the pre-pandemic phase, sometimes you tend to overlook some cavities because you're already so tired from doing the treatment.
Right.
Or sometimes if you have an x-ray and you need a second opinion, sometimes you DM your friends who are also dentists, and sometimes you don't know when they are going to reply. But having an AI like yours, it's going to have instant results as soon as the x-ray would come. I mean, as soon as you
Right.
put it in, it's going to show. But with regards to that, I want to ask though, because I'm totally for it, have you heard some various reactions from different dentists? Because I'm sure the older dentists might have a different opinion, and with regards to the newer one.
That's what we thought. But the thing is, and I'm not even saying this to kind of, pitch or kind of make ourselves even look better or what have you. I surprisingly, and this is surprising even to me, have received very little kind of negative or a kind of a resistance to kind of some kind of technology like ours, especially when we pitch it in a way where we say, you're not gonna be changing very much of your existing workflow. You're just adding a small little piece that will just be and basically kind of operating with your current workflow, so that we just augment kind of what you're already doing rather than replacing it. And so when they hear something along those lines, they're absolutely kind of thrilled. They're actually fascinated, and they actually talk about the various emerging alternative technologies that may also claim to aid in caries detection, things like transillumination devices and those type of things. And no joke, like a lot of the older dentists who've kind of had the years to kind of give them a shot, because they've been around for a few years, and they say they gave it that shot. It just seems a little awkward, extra to do, and just it will never replace my examination of the x-ray anyways. That transillumination device that you use while you're kind of looking at the patient manually only serves to support and help you do what you're doing at that time. Meaning, while you're looking at the patient's mouth, you can confirm a little bit better perhaps what you saw in the X-ray. But it doesn't ever really improve the X-rays as is. And then when we ask them, what is your X-ray imaging software experience like now? It's hardly this case of it's amazing or it's so easy to use. Most of the time, there's a lot of complaints of mouse clicks and just the limitations that image processing filters have. I mean, the intent is pretty clear to kind of improve the quality of the image to help the dentist better identify things. But that's still a very manual and time-consuming process that only adds to the cognitive and eye fatigue that you were referencing earlier. This idea of just sitting there, image after image, and having to parse through every single image. The other kind of thing that our technology and even our competitors will be able to do with AI is this idea of just flagging and giving you an idea while you're looking, let's say, at a full mouth spread of the images, just those images that you want to perhaps look further into and zoom into. And our technology and how we want to have it operate is this idea that as soon as you zoom in, our application kicks in, and you are able to now be able to see our inferences, and then also take them away just as easily, and be able to just compare what our model is inferencing, what you're seeing, and then go right to the page. No need to kind of tool around with the various filters that may be there, go through these arcane menus of multiple clicks to get to something and configure something. None of that. We just want it to be bam, 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 so that you can spend most of your time as a dentist actually doing the necessary procedures, or actually kind of manually examining the patient thoroughly with enough time there, so that you're not wasting unnecessary time with the image part of it as well. And so there's a couple of things that I've noticed that is just kind of so unique to the dentist that I think the AI sort of directly addresses compared to, let's say, physicians in the medical field, right? So I don't know what it's like in the Philippines, but here in the US, in hospitals, doctors and radiologists, when they take an MRI or an X-ray or a CT scan of some sort, there's not just one radiologist or a doctor looking at the image. One doctor looks at it, provides his or her opinion. Then it goes to another person, provides his or her opinion. Then it goes to another specialist, his or her opinion. And then they combine it, and as like a panelist of any kind, they will make a consensus. They will make a group-based decision on what they see and make the final diagnosis from there. And that's always the case. For any X-ray that you'll be working with, in a hospital setting, maybe in a private practice, and you have one physician, maybe like an ortho physician, maybe it's one, but very rare. In dentistry, not rare at all. In fact, you're going to always just get that one dentist and that one dentist input with the X-rays. And then the other thing is this idea that with dentists, especially general dentists here, they're expected to be just as good as a radiologist, as an oral radiologist, as they are to be with their hands, and a dentist at that. It's kind of interesting how they're expected to do a little bit of everything, like literally everything. Be a business person running a practice, be a radiologist looking at the X-ray, be the technician being the one that's also kind of doing the filling and implants and you name it, like almost anything and everything. In the medical field, they don't do that. They have a specialization where certain doctors and specialists are only allowed and trained and certified to kind of be able to read X-rays and just do that all day. In radiologists in the hospital today, that's their job. They literally get these images to them, they provide their opinion, and then rinse and repeat. And so we don't see that in dentistry, and we wonder why, and there's, I'm sure, reasons for it. But I think the fact of the matter is that expecting somebody to do everything, and do a very good job at all of that would be a lot, right? And so, can we automate certain things that we know we can automate with even better quality assurance, so that we can then allow the dentist to really focus on their craft, their ability to kind of do a good job on the patient, so that the patient has less opportunities to have decay, right? Things along those nature, and really kind of take the time to instruct the patient about proper oral hygiene. Like, the time is now there if we are able to use AI to just offload the imaging aspect of it from you guys. And that kind of leads into my vision, and that's my last probably long spiel of Dentuit, is a vision and how I see Dentuit fit into the future. But that sort of is a segue into what I see Dentuit really becoming, or dental AI rather, really kind of helping facilitate for the future of dentistry. So yeah.
Yeah, man, and that is indeed true. Those are some of the things that people don't see in dentists compared to other health fields. Is that we need to be well versed in multiple aspects, and most likely the reason is a toothache is a real pain in the butt if you experience it. Like, if you cannot sleep because of a toothache, you really cannot sleep because the pain is out of this world. And that's the cool thing about Dentuit, is that we get to have that second opinion that we would want from our friends immediately. And also, going back to what you said, it's so refreshing that you barely heard anything negative about it, because I'm sure you could ask your brother, when it comes to new technology and dentistry, there's always going to be opposing views, because, like I said, every school has a different school of thought, and some are more better in this procedure or in this school of thought than the other. So it's really nice that you're like the glue that connects everything together. Now, again, the title of this podcast is IDK What To Say. It's because we try to figure things out. Now, we talk about Dentuit, but this is for the listeners who are thinking of starting their own app or their own program or something. What are the initial obstacles that you experience when making Dentuit happen? in the business or in the programming standpoint?
Well, so from the programming standpoint, a lot of the technology development of the model itself is sort of on my co-founder, and so that may be an advice. So my co-founder is John. He has a PhD in computer science and is currently also a senior scientist at a federal lab here in this area, and so like the capabilities are certainly there. So I will say that like probably the important thing from my angle and my perspective is to really learn to collaborate, learn to kind of be open to working with other people and understanding what you're able to do and what you're not able to do really well. It's easy to kind of be in this kind of train of thought where you can just do a little bit of everything yourself, and that's simply not possible if you want to do a good job and be successful. And so understanding what you're really kind of uniquely kind of good at on a consistent basis and how that perhaps integrates and matches up with your future co-founders, if you will. You really want to, that's why a lot of investors say, again, for one, they look for that ideal number of two as like the starting founding team, the two co-founders, never really one. And then secondly, they always invest at such an early stage in not your idea, but the team, the founders. They want to see, how well you guys work together. And it makes complete sense because John and I, we could perhaps be doing some other tangential AI project and we will be operating and being productive just the same. And so what does that mean is that then that goes into my other advice and kind of, some advice about starting maybe a company around technology, and starting off as an entrepreneur is always understand your problem space to start. And I always say this to everyone. I'm like, a broken record in that respect, but I'm a firm believer that you don't start with the solution. You don't start with the technology. You start with the problem space, the problem itself. You just sit there and understand what is the as is so that you can then see where that technology could be in the future. So that, the solution that you make is actually the solution. It's not some technology that's just a magic trick at the end of the day. Because a lot of AI, I'm afraid, is becoming like that in some sense with all the hype that is going on. It's hard to tell if it's actually machine learning or is it using neural networks and deep learning. And so, I think it's also important that, so I'm the CEO and my co-founder is the CTO. And as a CEO, it's not very common to see a level of technical understanding and some basic background with that. Oftentimes you see, I don't know, maybe the trend is going to change with AI startups becoming a bit more kind of ubiquitous in our society as it's becoming a lot more accessible and everything. But, you see a lot of technology startups prior to that with, very kind of a CEO with a business mindset and then the CTO with the non-business, but just the technical mindset. I don't believe in that. I believe that, it's important to kind of know a little bit of everything to a certain point where you can be dangerous with it, right? Like what I said earlier. Yeah. But the idea that, I came with a computer science with some life science kind of understanding and background. And that allows me to have very productive, meaningful, and progressive conversations with my CTO rather than me just sitting there assuming that whatever he's saying is going to be always right or whatever, and you just go with whatever he or she says. And so it's important, I think, to know also the technology that you want to build and how you want to build it to a certain degree, no matter what, your main role is. And so, knowing, what you truly are there for as a kind of a role player as part of this team, and then also certainly kind of knowing, the other person's roles to a certain degree and being able to kind of work together on that. And then, really finding somebody that you can really work well with. I mean, that's, easy to say. And I know, there's a lot of luck involved in that. But, I think for me, the reason why I was able to perhaps identify John as a collaborator and a co-founder and such is that, number one, I knew myself better, right? The only way that you know how you're going to work well with somebody else is if you know your tendencies and how you work well in certain high stress situations. Because guess what? This whole startup thing from day zero is a high stress situation because there's a lot of risk involved. And
it seems so.
So how do you know yourself in these high stress situations? And then how does that play off of your partner, of your co-founder? How do they respond to high stress? And you really want to kind of do that kind of initial testing out process. And that's what John and I exactly did. And this is how I was able to eventually become full time. Is I think we looked at, so when we hooked up around the summer to become, co-founders for this venture, we were still both kind of occupied with our day job, but we knew that this was something that we were really truly passionate about. But we needed to figure out, do we work well together and make this successful? And so we took around from the summer until the November of 2019, so pretty much the end of 2019, effectively just working on this one federal grant, this proposal. And this is like a multi-month effort. And this kind of really kind of gave us an idea of how well we work together, or how do we work together, and what are some of the things to keep in mind when we work together. And that was really that testing out kind of point, where then when we kind of submitted a successful proposal and we got the award in the following year in July 2020, that was a huge validation that, not only is our idea considered promising by other people, including federal agencies, but that we were able to kind of work together between two people and bring together a proposal that is oftentimes written by a team, and be not only accepted for the award, but also have across the board just positive reviews from our examiners, our review and feedback. Is just the way that we, created the proposal. It was just a reflection of our workflow process. We use Trello, we use various kind of cloud-based tools. And so our transition to, let's say, remote work in coronavirus times, in this kind of era that we're living in now, wasn't too much of an adjustment, because we were only meeting up every Sunday to kind of meet in person and at least kind of get more work done on the spot. But most of the time we were learning how to leverage the tools that we have access to at a minimal cost to be able to optimize collaborative workflows through the cloud, through online, and it wasn't much of an adjustment when the pandemic hit for us.
Well, it's really good that you found the perfect partner. But yeah, man, one thing that I'm so curious with is, if you're going to have a tech startup, like, how do you find, congratulations by the grant, by the way, but how do you
Yeah.
find those leads, man? Do you know somebody who has connections? Is there a site you could check, like, hey, where can I find potential investors for this app I'm doing? And how does the pitching process work?
Right. So we haven't even gotten to that point of pitching investors. We've learned through, webinars, and that is part of probably my answer that I was going to really say, is that, everything is a lot more remote now. So a lot of things are webinars, so you get to attend a lot more things. But at the same time, before the pandemic, I was trying to plug myself into the startup community as much as possible in this region, in this Baltimore area. And so, to be quite frank, so I don't know what other communities are like, and I do and am aware that perhaps other communities, other less metropolitan cities, don't have as much of a community or things like that, but they do matter. That's the point I'm trying to make. So someone is looking to at least start some community to then segue into perhaps companies that may be born out of such community. That is the only way. I think that oftentimes you see innovation really come out of this one hub or region. And for me, I was plugging myself into the Baltimore's kind of the city's kind of startup community at the time, some combination of student entrepreneurship, but really also kind of health tech entrepreneurship communities, and then the biotech without any AI, but still biotech in that area, because Baltimore is unique, and fortunately so, to have some of the top medical institutions in this area, Johns Hopkins being one of them, and such, and the UMB Maryland medical system, as well as several other universities in the area. And so you see a lot of kind of non-medical research kind of now converging, something like computer technology research, converging with the highly kind of sophisticated and advanced medical research that's been around in Baltimore for years now, with Johns Hopkins medical system, Maryland medical system. And now you start to see kind of now this kind of interdisciplinary collaboration that you see with our team as well. And that was kind of the driving force behind our compelling kind of motivation for developing a solution that we think will really work. Because we decided to partner with an entire dental school
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
start. And that was one of our earliest strategic decision to make was, we were always going to be science first, and making a quick buck wasn't going to ever be the priority. The priority was, you know, answering the question of how can we make the best possible, support system with the detection model, and make it as usable and easy to use as possible. In answering those questions, making a quick buck isn't really the best strategy to get there. The strategy is, okay, where's the science that is not quite there yet? What is the expertise that we need as Dentuit that we don't have internally or in house? There's obviously that kind of team of clinical experts that we're now working with at the dental school. And so I always tell other kind of health tech startups that are asking for advice or asking about what are some of the things that I think about or I thought about when starting, was really being open again to collaboration, to really this idea of, if you're going to be, especially an AI startup, an AI in a vacuum by itself in some blank area is absolutely useless. I don't care how sophisticated or amazing the techniques are, it doesn't matter. If it doesn't solve a problem, it's useless. So the idea is that you work with the necessary experts to understand, okay, how can I make this amazing, potentially amazing technology useful? And that is really the beginning of that conversation of understanding now, oh, so this is the current workflow. Oh, so this is why you're considering AI, because like this is the issues that you're dealing with. And you're starting to understand now as a computer technologist, the broader kind of problem space that you're kind of trying to develop a solution for. And so that conversation leads to one thing to another. And so how I got plugged in actually, again, was initially that kind of me going to these small kind of events. And again, this was in person at the time, wasn't as virtual, but I think making it virtual now is even more accessible. But I was going to these, and I just met this one lady who was actually the director of the state's kind of venture development fund, of one of the many funds, but she was the director for that kind of particular fund. And one thing led to another. She kind of helped me discover even and know about something like this fund, this kind of grant. And I was persistent, and you sort of have to be that way in the beginning. No one knows you at the beginning, and I'm also learning that no one is also going to really know that your thing is amazing. There's going to be a lot of skepticism, much more and way beyond just your parents, right? Like this idea that one kind of thing that I kind of didn't expect and as much was this level of still kind of skepticism and disbelief about what I am capable of doing. Maybe the way I look, I don't know, but maybe because we're so small as a two founding team, and maybe also AI is just lost on many people still. And that just comes with education, and that comes with kind of level setting expectations, right? And so I think for me, it's just a matter of, working with the right people, having a conversation and having the right conversations with the right people in the right areas of time. So, first, to start, just, people who says this is right. Just, get yourself out there, whether it's attending these webinars, because how I fill my schedule these days outside of the R&D that I do is literally webinars. Like a lot of the Eventbrite stuff and various health tech, I just try to expose myself to as much knowledge and maybe some networking possible. I will say the networking is a little bit overrated with the virtual thing. I don't think it's very effective, nor is there much motivation for me to network with strangers over Zoom or whatever. But I think the idea of being able to access now various live information sessions through webinars to learn and expose yourself to new ideas and concepts is more accessible than ever. I mean, when you're talking about everything being online and largely free because they are online, there's no logistical overhead or anything like that. The opportunities in my mind are almost limitless if you have the mindset of just a learning and a learner mindset, for sure.
Yeah, man. And again, that's really insightful because I would think that, if I was starting a tech company, it would be so hard to explain to someone that, hey, this is me, my name, which you aren't aware of, and this is my idea, which has never been seen anywhere. And it's really good that you made the point that, you have to make your name out. You got to put your name out there so at least people would be familiar with you, so that if you pitch something, you'd get some backing up. But going to what you said, another ingenious thing about Dentuit, aside from getting dentists all over the world, is tying up with a school. And the reason for that is, it's so hard to get a recall of a patient when it comes to taking tests. But since it is in a school, if you have like a certain patient that you could take multiple styles of x-rays, bite wing, periapical, or panoramic, and you could cross-examine if the AI would work on the bite wing, the periapical, if it's going to be the same type of depth or cavities, would they detect it in the same method? That's the cool thing about going with the school route. And also, that students will always bring patients in, so it's really smart you did that, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, we were just talking about that. This idea of, as we were talking about next steps and ideas, I don't want to give away too much, but one of the ideas was just that, was this idea of not just randomly curating data from a large data set, like x-rays from a large data set, and just randomly doing that, but rather now kind of being a little bit more intentional and specific in how we curate images based on a patient. So leaving panoramic aside, let's say we have a biowing and a periapical for roughly the same set of tooth in the same anatomical location. And we know that because we curated it in that way, right? Then we can begin to compare the performance of our model across different image types. It's harder to do that when you know that the image of a bite wing and the image of the periapical that you're comparing the model on are looking at two different things. But if we
Exactly.
know, let's say, that tooth that those two images are looking at, or has a capture of, is the same tooth with a certain lesion or some profile that we already know beforehand as ground truth to use as a corollary, we can compare that based on how our model then sees it across both periapical and biome. And you would like to hope that the ideal situation would be that it would be the exact same inference being made because the model recognizes the same kind of more or less lesion that the tooth is rendering or displaying, even if it's a periapical or a biome. Now, to be very clear, the model is not going to know, oh, we're looking at the very same tooth. That's not going to be the approach or the arrival at the inference at the end, but it's going to recognize the lesion and the demographic
Exactly.
in a
Exactly.
periapical setting as well as a bite wing setting. And with carious lesions, we know that with the angulation of the beam with the periapical, there's going to be a lot more distortion and a lot less certainty with the caries. And so we're trying to figure out ways to make that a lot more robust. And one way of doing that is to understand first, how do we compare the results that we get at the end of the day?
Yeah, man, and that very well said. Also, aside from the X-rays, if you need to
Yeah.
cross-check with the patient itself, you have the accessibility to. But yeah, going to Dentuit, like, what is your timetable before this becomes readily available to the public? And by that I mean like it will be available in apps, or you could already insurance could already use it, and the full stage, and not just a beta test.
Right. Yeah, those are all great questions, and some of those questions we're still, working through or trying to understand better to answer as we kind of develop, our technologies. We're still very much still in the R&D phase, although we're more now on the tail end of things. So that now we're starting to see, how we can now we're seeing the door open for us to now transition to making our model as is, having trained, usable, and having that in some prototype and usable sense. And so we want to get to that stage without again giving away too much. But
You
really,
don't need to, man.
yeah, no. But our timeline really is that approach that we see with some other fellow dental AI startups in this country, is this idea of first kind of or in parallel, kind of provisioning a solution for both the provider and the payer. So the insurance carriers, in this respect, comes first in the timeline of things, and that is how others are also doing it, largely because of the regulatory obstacle that really kind of takes precedence for being able to have our product be used by the providers. And so, as we kind of figure out, and everyone figures out the pathway to market for that with, to the provider market, you can also have a parallel solution for the payers, for the insurance carriers. And so we're actively kind of working on that. And we're actively trying to now kind of formulate early relationships and pilot kind of opportunities now over I would say, the next few months. And by the summer, we should have a very good understanding of who our insurer partners are, and what our pilot program and what success for that pilot program that we're planning would look like. And so by the end of the summer, I imagine that we would have our pilot well underway, and our relationship really actively kind of well underway with some national insurers in this country, and some of the programs that we've been applying to as well, while kind of continuing to do very kind of deep clinical and technical R&D on basically bringing our other kind of technology for the provider to use. And that is a lot more, I will say, difficult of a computer vision challenge. That's also another reason why we see a lot more early kind of demos for insurers be a lot more possible, because I think the computer vision problem that it's trying to solve is a bit more simpler and a bit more trivial compared to the more complex case of a physician or a dentist looking at the X-ray. They're looking for a lot more things, and perhaps a lot of more nuanced things that perhaps a claims review processor isn't looking for as much. They're just looking to approve or reject based on a claims being submitted. And so, but that being said, I mean, in terms of when we'll have something on the market for the dentist, we're doing our best to push that timeline closer to sometime next year. But we will see with that. We want to, we're in some sense in no rush, because we're focused so much on making sure the initial process of the R&D is done properly, in documented fashion, in a scientific evidence-based fashion, so that at the end goal, the end result will kind of sort of formulate on its own. Because the thing is, truly, with an AI product, I do believe that many of the decisions that you make in the beginning, not at the end with the hypertuning and all that, but the algorithmic kind of, but rather the project decisions that you make at the very beginning for your machine learning project is going to dictate the performance and the quality of your product at the end, downstream. And so we're taking that very seriously, because that is our understanding based on our experience, and we're really taking our time to make sure our R&D is pretty much on point in terms of addressing the various concerns like bias, concept shift, various kind of data science related statistical kind of concerns that is emerging or is well aware of, especially in the medical imaging space. And we want to definitely not just ignore it and keep it on the side, and just focus on marketing our product. Like that is not our concern. We want to be able to truly kind of be effective once we kind of deploy our product to market. And that, again, starts with something as like data curation. How did you collect your data? How did you annotate your data? What was your standard? What was your process? And what was the thought, kind of the thinking behind it? Is it documented? And to be quite frank, where are your scientific publications on that? And we don't see much of that still yet. Anyways, we anticipate more and more coming out from some of our competitors, if you will, in the coming months, hopefully, and we'll be doing the same. Our goal has always been, again, science first, and part of that is being able to publish and have peer-reviewed, our study results and our findings.
Yeah, man, that's really a good mindset when it comes to making your app, because for all tech startups, it's always a rat race on who gets to release it first. But you don't want to release anything that is half baked or that is filled with bugs, because at the
Right.
end of the day, it's gonna blow up on your
Yeah,
end
it's not going to
if
get
it
allowed.
isn't working.
Hopefully catch it, right? And they'll hopefully catch those type of technology submissions and won't give it the clearance to have it sold to the providers directly. And so there's a reason why I guess the process is a bit rigorous here in the U.S. is that they use that rigor to essentially filter out hopefully anything that may harm the patient in some sense. And so
Yeah,
it's all risking that technology so that it provides the benefits with minimal risk to the patient. Ultimately.
that's true. Because yeah, at the end of the day, it should be the patient, the dentist, and the insurers who would be benefiting from this. Now we are
Absolutely.
winding down already in this episode because you've been very generous with your time. But I have to ask, man, outside of Dentuit, do you still have other ideas for apps that you want to build? Is there
Oh
anything
yeah.
moving forward for you?
I mean, I think my mindset and perspective on this has been more serial in terms of entrepreneurship, and so it's more like when people are like, how are you going to stick with this company and take it public and etc. I mean, those are questions that are a little bit less relevant to me, and more it's more about what are the problems that I can solve next. And so for me, it's more just moving on to the next thing. And so absolutely, I try to remain focused on the Dentuit stuff at hand, so that we can achieve it successfully. But of course, there are other ideas that I have, and some of them are health related as well. Some of them are related to my personal life that I wish I had, obviously, and some of them I see already kind of happening in our space, while I'm trying to work on Dentuit. And so those are all exciting things. And so one perhaps thing that I've been thinking about is just mental health and the ability to kind of really recognize and be able to better identify and manage and just deal with the stigma of more or less mental health in our society. And I'm not sure if it's an American thing or if it's just a thing in general, but mental health, in my mind, it just is such a broad and such a individualized experience for each person that it's very difficult for me to say, oh, that person is this category of this diagnosis of that in mental health, because I feel like things are a lot more nuanced and complex than that. The issue is we don't know much about our body, let alone our brain, and so it's just like one of those things where maybe research you sort of wait for the right timing as well, and that is another thing that I again have learned to really understand and embrace is just timing. This idea that again, if I was to pursue Dentuit, let's say if I had tried to pursue Dentuit 10 years ago, it would have been very different. I wouldn't have had the same mindset, the same connections. So I do truly believe that, and the technology hasn't fully developed. So you have to kind of take into all of that as you kind of think about your next steps and the ideas that you want to kind of address. And is the problem solved to a certain degree, or is it still a long-standing problem that has yet to be addressed, really? And so those are the things that I also look for. Is those things that in society that why is this still an issue? Why are people just accepting it as an issue? Can we go about addressing that? And then the mental health, going into also this idea of the concerns that people have with mental health and social media a little bit. I also have been fascinated with what Sean Parker has been kind of recently vocalizing, one of the one of the founders of Facebook and the founding president, and he's kind of notorious for being the founder, but equally notorious for being kind of um, rejecting kind of the the idea that Facebook is not impacting anyone's mental
Eh,
health.
That's
That's
that's the
impacting.
guy Justin Timberlake played in the
Yeah,
Social Network,
that's
right?
right.
Yeah, that.
Yes, he has a certain reputation, but generally speaking, I really align with how he looks at the world in respect to technology. And when it comes to Facebook and its impact on psyche, there's a reason why I don't have one. I don't have an account intentionally. It's one of those things where I do truly believe what Sean Parker is also saying is this idea that it's just a feedback validation mechanism, a loop that really plays a deep and dark role and a good amount of just regular people that are using it without any malicious intent. And over time, you just see it devolve into this kind of really almost addictive kind of mechanism for these human psyche. And it's those things that people don't want to talk about, don't want to even really kind of bring up to the surface. It's controversial. But if you have someone that is a founder and a president, sitting president on the board of Facebook, saying that Facebook is an issue in regards to this area, then it does strike a certain chord, a certain kind of seriousness. And I think over time we're going to start seeing the effects, but hopefully before it gets too kind of severe, I'm hoping that there's kind of more recognition and solutions to kind of mitigate that level of psychological dependence, let's say, on your Facebook status or among other likes or among other things like that. So those are the
Yeah,
things
man.
that yeah, kind of yeah, because like those are the things that if I was in that situation, I would probably want to get out. And so those are the things where are there solutions or alternative solutions out there that can help with that, so that you're not kind of negatively affected by social media in that regard. Mentally.
Yeah, man, and that thing about mental health is something that if you would build, I would love to keep an eye on or be in the loop. And let me tell you why. During the
But
pandemic in the Philippines, someone made this mental health quiz wherein you would get results if you're a suicidal person, if you have good mental health, or if you're depressed. And the thing about it is, it's made in the form of a BuzzFeed kind of quiz, the kind of BuzzFeed quiz where you just pick stuff. And
yeah,
it's very dangerous in a way that, number one, it's not interpreted by someone who, I mean, it wasn't proven that it's made
there's
by
no.
an expert. There is no science that backs up that the result is what the result is. And second, I mean, it causes hysteria in a sense that I see some of my friends who are posting that they're already suicidal or depressive, which is already worse, especially during a pandemic where the lockdown is happening, and you
Yeah,
receive that kind of result, which you aren't even sure if that's 100% accurate. So it would be
yeah,
really cool if you made something like that, backed by
yeah,
science, backed by research, and something where if someone reads it, they don't have to share it in their social media, and they would get the immediate help that they would need.
yeah. I mean, I'm on board with all of that. I mean, the thing is, like, I think it's a serious thing that we're gonna start seeing. I mean, I think people say that in comments of YouTube videos that or like the news that I watch, and I think it's true. Although it's concerning, is the idea that we're going to start seeing the real impacts of this pandemic after the fact it's over. So the kind of the undercurrent issues of things in the society, the drug abuse, the and then the mental, they're all kind of related in my mind. And so a lot of it is like the depression and the suicide rates among younger kind of even the generation below me, the prevalence of suicide there and that. So it's like one of those things where it is kind of insulting to kind of get to see something along those lines of some non-clinical quiz determining that someone is suicidal. I think that's absolutely uh, a terrible idea, in my opinion. At the same
Exactly.
time, it's equally important to recognize if someone is suicidal. And so there's definitely ways of doing that without just having some publicly posted kind of quiz result on social media. That's like probably how you don't want to go about it. This isn't really truly related to mental health, but this is just one of those things where technology just makes you wonder, like, what was the benefit there? It is I don't know. I'm sure you heard the Robin Hood suicide of this one guy, college student age guy
Oh
that
yeah.
had home, because of the pandemic, and just
Yeah,
started
yeah, I
trading.
heard that.
Yeah, my friends were really into it too, and they're telling me about the Robin Hood way back, like years back. Like we were into cryptocurrency like way back, honestly. But the thing is, I'm not into it. I'm not into stocks or anything like that. I don't do portfolios. But the thing is, he saw a negative balance one day, and he only invested 5,000, I think, of his own money. And he thought that he was only risking 5,000. He suddenly started doing options trading and got it to a negative balance of like close to $1 million. Yet the thing was, it wasn't truly him, being negative $1 million. It was options where it was more just the risk. So I don't know too much, but it was this kind of really unfortunate situation where he thought that he owed, and he put his family in ruin. And because he cared so much about the welfare of his family, he thought that killing himself, which he did, would kind of alleviate some of the financial consequences that may have come after the fact. The fact of the matter was, they kind of clarified it in an eventual email to the family, saying that that wasn't exactly the situation of him owing that much. It was just the way that the numbers looked at the time in the stock market, or something along those lines. So that's like, damn, like, yeah, it's just one of those things where it's
Yeah,
like,
that
I understand, the technological innovation with Robinhood, from how it brokers, and makes its money without commission. That kind of model is very innovative, like without question. It's a good attempt to kind of bring things, increase access to more people to something like this. But this is like
exactly.
saying, oh, we want more people to be doctors, but screw medical school because that's way too much. Let's just do a less kind of sophisticated program that accepts more people, and we have more doctors now. I mean,
Exactly.
imagine a society with like very kind of half-trained doctors out there operating on patients. Like, that would be very concerning. And something similar was the case here, where we have amateur investors encouraged to trade options, and realize, errors that wasn't even their errors on their part, and end up killing themselves.
Exactly, man, and yeah, that's also one of the reasons why I said earlier it's best that you perfect your app before releasing it, because if something like that happened, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I do know Robinhood was an app where you could trade stocks, and
Yeah.
stuff like that could happen, and it's very dangerous if it isn't properly thought of because of the possible implications.
It's
Brace it.
interesting how I'm in this situation now, for sure. I mean, think about it. Like, I quit my full-time job in June 2020. So just think about that. In the middle of the pandemic, I do the reverse, quit my job and start a company. So those are the things that for any other person would think that you're crazy, but that just only seems to affirm the entrepreneurship philosophy of things, of, you sort of have to be crazy to make it in this kind of aspect of industry, or business, for sure. Crazy in a good way, crazy in the sense of
Exactly.
like being willing to take the necessary risk. I think that it's a little bit different for me now compared to 2009. Again, because I know myself better. Again, I'm working with the right people. I've educated myself more with a degree in computer science. All those smaller things really seem to amount to now me addressing perhaps even a worse economic recession in a much more productive, and, like you said, making lemonade out of lemons here, in a much more productive and meaningful way. And it's very interesting, kind of compare the two scenarios here for myself. So, for sure.
Exactly. And also, if you think about it, it will be a good plot for a movie if ever they'll make one of your life, or something, a good TED Talk topic
Yeah,
if ever you'll
right,
have one, or when
right.
you'll have one.
I mean,
Now,
I don't know about me, but I would love to see somebody else than like Elon Musk as like the technology guy in the news all the time. Like, it would be nice to start seeing, and Mark Zuckerberg, like, it would be nice to see like some other now people coming up, into the mainstream media, in my mind, that like is like this young kind of visionary that like is actually solving, let's say, cancer detection with a blood test, that you can do at home. So not Theranos, but something like
Theranos is a different story.
yeah, Theranos is a learning lesson for all of us, to be very, very honest. But
True.
that's another story in itself, and that actually, also partially was the reason why I made certain decisions early on with Dentuit. Is just seeing how Theranos did things. I was absolutely shocked, and wasn't shocked about the end result, but was just shocked to the extent of what they're willing to do to kind of keep this train going as long as they could. But that being said, I mean, yeah, I think,
That was a crazy
I'm the
story.
type of guy
Yeah.
that I don't fanboy around Elon Musk. I don't fanboy about things like that. But it's more just, I think it's time to start seeing and recognizing just the things that we don't see in main media these days is just the innovation that's happening that we just don't see right now. But we're gonna start seeing that by some really motivated and just genius visionaries that are even younger than us. I think that are kind of finally kind of come up and really kind of emerge, out of, let's say, their own kind of space. I would, it would be very refreshing because all the technology kind of stereotypes that you kind of see in mainstream media is really kind of spearheaded by Elon's presence on Twitter and all that. I could care less about that. But those are the
Yeah.
things that I think will eventually come to pass, and hopefully we'll see some exciting new kind of leaders and representatives of our kind of industry and our kind of space as entrepreneurs for sure.
Yeah, and also if Dentuit comes out in the market, it could be you. Now, again, thank you so much for your time. But before I let you go, I think this is the perfect time if you have anything to promote, like all your socials or anywhere they could find Dentuit. This is the time, man. So please,
Yeah.
the floor is yours.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Honestly, I'm just glad to just be able to share a little bit about what we're doing. I think we're not yet at the stage of being able to really present much in terms of a product, but I will say that we know what we're doing in a certain way. We know what we know our kind of industry, and honestly, I think we have something really exciting coming up in the pipeline, and just giving you a fair warning that it's gonna be a game changer in terms of even compared to whatever our competitors in the US are doing. What they're doing is exciting too, and it's great, and I'm excited for them. But what we're going to come out with in the pipeline, let me just make very clear, and I just leave it at that. It's going to be a game changer for everyone, including uh, the dental industry first, but it's going to change the game for how we access healthcare in general moving forward. So it's going to be one of those things where you guys don't want to miss it for sure.
Well, I'm definitely going to be in the loop of that. Again, thank you so much, Dan Lee, for joining us on this episode. It's been very amazing. To everyone listening right now, please don't forget to check out Dentuit, Dan Lee. And also, don't forget to follow us on all our social media platforms and stream this on up where podcasts is available, videos available on YouTube. Again, have a great day, everyone. This is Paulo Gonzales and IDK What To Say. Wow, look at that. You did it, man. You watch until the end of the video, which is so cool and I love to hear your thoughts about it. So comment down below or follow us on all our social media platforms and tell us about what your thoughts are cuz IDK What To Say.